Republican America this week, Benghazi was all the rage. If you watched Fox News, this story was like, you know, they saved Hitler's brain times men walk on the moon. It was the biggest story ever. And if you listen to normal people, it was just some partisan dopes trying to make political hay off some dead bodies. I still don't know what the scandal is.
But
Does anyone?
Didn't they have a point?
No.
You don't think so? So
what is the
news now on the deadly terror attack on the U.S. consulate in Libya? Fox News sources telling us CIA officers on the ground in Benghazi during the attack sent requests for help but were denied. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin is live at the Pentagon with more on this. Jennifer.
Hi, John. Well, sources who were on the ground in Benghazi during the attack tell Fox News that, in fact, there were 3 separate requests to aid not only the attack that was occurring at the consulate and to try and help with that attack, but also requests for outside help, outside military to help once there were gunfires and firefights at the CIA annex. Those requests, we're told, came from higher headquarters. They were told to stand down. There were, as you know, Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods, the former Navy SEALs, were over at the CIA annex at about 9:40 p.m. when the first shots were heard at the consulate where the ambassador and his team were taking fire. I'm told that they radioed to their higher headquarters that they wanted permission to go and help the ambassador, to help the ambassador's teams. At that time, they were told by their higher-ups to, quote, stand down.
The way I see it is that one of the problems that Republicans have had on this is that lots of people in the media, and here probably, don't like Republicans. And so the Washington Post, for example, this week said, well, you know who's talking about Benghazi? It's people who go to Chick-fil-A and it's white rich guys,
Right.
But, if a white rich guy who likes...
what that meant. That was stupid.
Keep banging on about this.
Well, they do.
Yeah, right. But if Republicans say 2 + 2 = 4, it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong.
Okay, tell me what the scandal is.
Well, what
I honestly want to know, because I heard what a guy testified that he heard when there was the attack on the embassy that an attack was going on. So he called the Air Force or somebody in the military to send jets, and they said, I'm sorry, they couldn't get there in time. The end.
Well, no,
that's... Tell me what
I'll tell you what the scandal is. I mean, the problem is that this arose about 6 weeks before the election, when everybody was desperate to protect their side. So Fox News was, this is the worst scandal ever. MSNBC was, Obama did absolutely nothing wrong. He acted perfectly as always. And the reality was something in between, which was a U.S. ambassador was killed. There's only been 6 times in our nation's history when that happened. The president went on the air, and other people did too, and made statements that proved to be untrue about why the attack took place, that it was a reaction to this film. That's just a reality. Whether they were lying or just in error, the statements they made it was untrue.
It was a fluid situation.
No, but it's still, but when the government goes on the air and says things that prove to be untrue, that is something that needs to be investigated. And it was in a place where President Obama and NATO had gone and invaded and bombed and changed the regime. I'm not saying it's a huge scandal, but there certainly are questions when the government and political officials 6 weeks before an election say things about a major event like that that prove to be untrue. There should be investigations, even if the Republicans are doing it for political ends. The same.
This is the first thing that Fahad says he saw and filmed at the consulate compound. The cafeteria building up in flames. It was shortly before midnight, September 11th. The smoke so thick, the compound's main house is barely visible. And then this. After breaking through a window, men shout they have found a body. Suddenly, one of them cries out, "He's alive! He's alive!" The crowd cheers, "God is great!" Rushing for a car, they realize it's a foreigner. I was filming the video and I thought it was an American, Fahad recalls, but I thought it was a driver or a security guy. I never thought it was the ambassador. It's clear from the rest of the video that the man they pulled out was Ambassador Christopher Stevens. Fahad says he was alive, but barely. He had a pulse, and his eyes were moving, Fahad says. His mouth was black from all the smoke. 10 minutes later, rushed through the Benghazi streets in a civilian's car, the ambassador arrived at the hospital. But it was too late. Dr. Ziad Abu Zaid tells us he got a code blue call. Patient arrested, needs resuscitation.
No pulse, no breathing.
He too did not realize it was Stevens. The body was covered in soot, he says. I began resuscitation, but after 45 minutes, the patient gave no signs of life. The Libyan government has vowed to bring those who attacked the consulate to justice. But nearly a week later, there are still contradictory accounts of what happened.
Clinton?
Protests, but that's what was going on, Congressman.
Secretary Clinton, I appreciate most of those attacks were after the attack on the facility in Benghazi. You mentioned Cairo. It was interesting what else Ms. Nuland said that day. She said, if pressed by the press, if there's a connection between Cairo and Benghazi, she said this, there's no connection between the two. So here's what troubles me. Your experts knew the truth. Your spokesperson knew the truth. Greg Hicks knew the truth. But what troubles me more is I think you knew the truth. I want to show you a few things here. You're looking at an email you sent to your family. Here's what you said. At 11 o'clock that night, approximately 1 hour after you told the American people it was a video, you say to your family, 2 officers were killed today in Benghazi by an al-Qaeda-like group. You tell the American people one thing, you tell your family an entirely different story. Also, on the night of the attack, you had a call with the president of Libya. Here's what you said to him. Ansar al-Sharia is claiming responsibility. It's interesting, Mr. Katala, one of the guys arrested and charged, actually belonged to that group. And finally, and most significantly, the next day, within 24 hours, you had a conversation with the Egyptian Prime Minister. You told him this. We know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest. Let me read that one more time. We know, not we think, not it might be, we know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest. State Department experts knew the truth. You knew the truth. But that's not what the American people got. And again,
the same was true when Democrats were investigating Bush officials and saying these are the worst scandals ever. Republicans were saying nothing happened.
You know what Dick Cheney said 2 days ago? He said, when we were there on our watch, we were always ready on 9/11.
Well,
I swear to God, without irony.
Right.
That's what he said on the anniversary. Well, there wouldn't be an anniversary if he had been doing his job in the first place.
And the other thing that wasn't mentioned there in what Glenn said was the CIA. The CIA's initial assessment of what happened in Benghazi was that it was the result of these other attacks that were going on in other, around the Arab world. And here's the thing. This is a prototypical Washington scandal. It's a scandal about a memo. The big bombshell that was released by ABC News was 12 edits to the memo. That's what we're down to. Republicans are so desperate for a scandal that they're now fighting over whether or not the talking points were massaged properly before Susan Rice went on Meet the Press. The underlying scandal, what Republicans are trying to imply, and the reason that the mainstream media isn't picking it up, they're implying that either Barack Obama himself, the President of the United States, decided not to protect that embassy, that compound, decided not to help them, right? Or that they created this entire cover-up to stop people from knowing that they haven't gotten rid of every single member of al-Qaeda. And neither of those two things is either true or plausible.
The scandal here is that the media, as it did during the Bushes, sides with power. The media did not want to investigate this, and so it reported a process story right from the beginning. What was the first story? Mitt Romney attacks the president.
if you look at the statement that I made, I clearly said that it was an attack, and I also said that there were some who tried to justify it on the basis of the video, Congressman. And I think
but real quick, calling it an attack is like saying the sky's blue. Of course, it was an attack.
Well,
we want to know the truth.
So do we know the truth now? After all the hearings, an 800-page report, some of those 11 hours of testimony. You heard the frustration of Congressman Jim Jordan. That was last October, asking then about Secretary Clinton's time and the early narrative around the attack on the U.S. outpost in Benghazi. Now the Republican report coming today does say Clinton should have realized the risks facing personnel in Benghazi, but that's too low a bar. This was about accountability. This was about showing that there was some kind of setup, that this system had been hiding the truth from us. So let's talk with Congressman Jordan. He wrote his own addendum to the report, and he joins us now. Congressman, tell me if I'm wrong, but I read in to your writing of an addendum a frustration with the overall report. No real conclusions by design, and it doesn't seem any smoking gun that tells us the truth. Your take.
I mean, no, the overall report, I think, it's about the facts, what happened. But Mr. Pompeo and I felt it was also important to ask the why questions. You know, why were we still in Benghazi when almost every other country had left? Why did we stay in Benghazi when the security situation was so terrible, so dangerous? And then why did the administration mislead us? Why did Secretary Clinton, as your clip described, why did she try to blame it publicly and mislead the American people, blaming it on a video-inspired protest that led to the attack, and not just tell the truth, which was that it was a terrorist attack from the get-go, and they knew it from the get-go?
But at the end of the day, because look, a lot of this is being dismissed as partisan playing, that you guys want to put on Hillary Clinton. You tried every way that you could, and now you have an 800-page report that by design doesn't draw conclusions. Do you believe that Hillary Clinton did things wrong on purpose to set up what happened at Benghazi and then to cover up what happened at Benghazi?
Here's what I believe, Chris. They were so invested. Libya was supposed to be their shining foreign policy success story. They were so invested in this and so committed to this that they didn't look at the facts. When Gaddafi was thrown out in August of 2011, the next 13 months there were 200 security incidents. There's an assassination attempt on the British ambassador. One DSA agent who went there and came back described Benghazi like this. He said it's a suicide mission. Everyone is going to die. So that was the security posture, but they were so invested in this they had to stay, and then 9/11 2012 happens, and there's a terrorist attack, and they're 56 days before an election. And so the evidence shows, and shows rather strongly, that they misled the American people and says, we can't tell the truth. We can't talk about how bad the security situation was. We can't talk about the fact that this was a terrorist attack. We have to mislead the American people because we are just 8 weeks before an election. This was supposed to be our legacy. So let's say it was caused by the video. And they stuck with that message publicly, even though privately they were conveying the truth to everyone and saying it was a terrorist attack. Like the email that Secretary Clinton sent to her daughter the night of the attack, where she said, we know terrorists killed 2 of our people. That's what she said privately, but publicly that same night, while Tyrone Woods is still on the roof of the annex, she's telling the American people some have sought to justify this vicious behavior as a response to inflammatory material on the internet. That was the problem.
But as you know,
no administration should do that.
But as you know, and as we've discussed before, Secretary Clinton says that she was getting different reports on the intelligence, and that was the reflection of the different statements. And nothing that we've, you know, you guys didn't give us the whole report. You only gave us 200 pages. We'll get some later, but we can discuss that another time. But do you have anything to prove that she knew one thing but said something else, that it wasn't about changing intelligence?
Yeah, we have her statements, because while the
she says the statements changed because the intel changed.
But the point is, Chris, the intel did change, but her statements didn't. They were consistently publicly they blamed the video, and consistently privately they said it was a terrorist attack, because the people in Libya knew right from the start there was no protest. Greg Hicks was asked about that. He said, if there had been a protest, would Ambassador Stevens have reported it? And Greg Hicks' testimony was absolutely. For there to have been a protest, and for this ambassador, as good as he was, one of the best we had, not to report it is unbelievable. Of course he would have reported it. No one reported it. So her story didn't change, even though the intelligence did. And that's what we point out in what Mike and I wrote.
Okay, so that's one issue. Another issue is, and I know you take up several, people are going to have to read the reports and your addendum for themselves, obviously, was about the role of the military. Now, the idea that the military didn't do all it could or was held back from doing what it should have done, Lieutenant General Dana Chipman, as you know, said multiple times in interviews, that's not true. The military did what it was supposed to do. You don't buy that. Why?
Well, what we know is this. No assets were put in motion before the attack was even over. No assets ever got to Libya until 23 hours after the attack had started, and they didn't get to Benghazi. They got to Tripoli. So well, the one thing we conclude in our report is we didn't seem to have the urgency that was needed. We didn't move heaven and earth to get help to the people who were fighting for their lives.
Mortar attack team, the Libyan mortar, the people who were shelling, that laser could have helped guide in any Spectre gunship or any other form of military help if it had been sent from Sigonella.
Or an armed drone even. Jennifer Griffin, again, we'll get back to you later. Thank you so much.
As Jennifer just reported, the CIA requested military backup 3 times for the besieged U.S. consulate in Libya, and 3 times it was denied. U.S. Navy SEAL Tyrone Woods was one of the 4 Americans killed in the terror attack. He ignored the orders to stand down. He went to the consulate to try to save those in peril. He fought to the bitter end, all the way back at the CIA annex, trying to keep the attackers at bay. His body was found slumped over his machine gun. They believe he fired to the last moment. His father, Charlie, is not interested in political arguments, but he does want to know who in the administration made the call not to dispatch military assets that might have saved his son's life, instead leaving Tyrone Woods and the other Americans to fend for themselves. Charlie Woods joins us live now by phone. Charlie, your reaction to the breaking news.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your introduction, and I do want to reiterate this and really emphasize again, this is not about politics. This is about, if it were about politics, it would dishonor my son's death. This has to do with honor, integrity, and justice.
As you learn more about his final moments, how he requested backup twice, 3 times, and was denied 3 times, and how he ignored the orders to stand down, how he rushed to the scene to try to save the ambassador, and ultimately paid with his own life for his heroism. Your thoughts on that?
This news that he disobeyed his orders does not surprise me. My son was an American hero, and he had the moral strength to do what was right, even if that would professionally cost him his job, even if it would potentially cost him his life. He was a hero who was willing to do whatever was necessary to respond to their cries for help. If, in fact, those people in the White House were as courageous and had the moral strength that my son Ty had, immediately, within minutes of when they found there was the first attack, they would have given permission, not denied permission, for those C-130s to have gone up there. And this is I don't know much about weapons, but it's coming out right now that they actually had laser targets focused on the mortars that were being sent to kill my son, and they refused to pull the trigger. They refused to send those C-30s. To me, I'm an attorney. This may not meet the legal test of murder, but to me, that is not only cowardice, but those people who made the decision and who knew about the decision and lied about it are murderers of my son. That's a very strong statement for me to make, but for their benefit, they need to clear their conscience, they need to stand up, and they need to change the direction of their lives. And I want to say right now, you know who you are. I totally forgive you, but I hope years from now you change the direction of your life.
There was no support. And having seen the film this morning, if there's one theme that emerges, that is it, that they were left alone. There was no one to back you up. Throughout the film, you see heroes understanding, based on their experience, that the American military will be there to back them up and support them. And help never came.
I mean, for us, for the military to come and support us, the agency, we wouldn't expected it. But the fact that the U.S. ambassador had been missing probably for about 5 hours before they actually officially, he was considered dead, and they didn't send anything or attempt to push anything that way is pretty crazy. I mean, I would never expect him just to leave the ambassador out there to hang out.
And what about all the CIA agents who were in the annex?
Again, my view is they didn't even try, and that's where the problem. And that's where the film does a great job of showing that even though the head shed or the headquarters elements with the Department of Defense were getting assets and moving them, that it eventually just stopped for some reason. We still don't know why. What did you expect would come? What did you think would show up? Who or what?
The biggest thing I think we really needed was mainly air support. I mean, any kind of...
Just something to fly over.
How hard would that have been?
Not hard. There's, again, people that see the movie and read the book know that it wouldn't have been difficult.
and all do the right thing, who had begged for security increases there and was denied those security increases. And they had, in fact, been diminished repeatedly leading up to September 11th. And that's another thing that the investigators have found, which was he had no business being in Benghazi on 9/11. The administration should not have allowed it. And if they were going to send him, they should have sent him with proper security. But he was killed that night. And you went to the consulate, the very facility which he was killed. You kept running in to try to get him, right?
Multiple times.
Do you believe there would have been any chance to save him?
Oh, yeah.
They'd be alive
today, 100%.
Perfect, and it was flawed, then we might as well all go home.
But the point is that in the Middle East, we're saying that these are also imperfect revolutions. No, I agree with Bill. Whenever the U.S. goes in and tries to impose our vision of democracy in that region, we fail. We took Mossadegh out in Iran, and we ended up with the Shah, and then we ended up with
But that's not our fault. It's not our fault what came out. We didn't go into Egypt.
Well, we
wound up with the Muslim Brotherhood.
We didn't go into Egypt. We were supporting and propping up Mubarak for 30 years, even as we were cheering for all the Tahrir Square demonstrators as though we were on their side. It was our government that kept Mubarak in power, just like we've done across the entire Muslim world. And it's amazing for you to say that, well, look at all these Muslims. The minute you give them a little bit of freedom, they go wild and they start being all violent. How can you be a citizen of the United States, the country that has generated more violence and militarism in the world over the last 5 or 6 decades, and say, look at those people over there, they are incredibly violent? We play a significant role in what has been happening in the Middle East because we've been interfering and dominating that region in order to have access to the oil.
I wasn't talking about violence.
Far cry from the dreams of so many Libyans when they rose up last year. Arwa Damon, CNN, Benghazi, Libya.